I am starting with question number 5. And you are saying, as a qualified town planner, what is your role in shaping policy for formation and spatial transformation in Johannesburg? Look, this is a loaded question because as much as we are qualified town planners, we are working within a policy environment that is dictated by the current politics of the city. We as planners do as much as we can possibly do to try and shape how we could create better communities within our cities and in Johannesburg in particular. But planning is a competition between politics and good planning, approaches. So too often, politics or influence of your elected, city councillors would sway you in a way towards a particular outcome of your proposals insofar as spatial planning is concerned. So we planners try to implement the best policies or rather the best approaches for development in the city, but eventually what seems to be taking center stage is your political influence, and your developments therefore of the city depend on those that are in majority in the political sort of city council structures. For example, at the moment, planners have tried so much to try and come with a livable sort of city. If we look at it, to densify certain areas like bedrooms, to gentrify them, but of course everything revolves around whether or not the city has got the financial resources to be able to implement those. So we as planners could do our best, but eventually, of course, it's the resources of the city that would determine whether or not our plans are implemented. Secondly, your question is, how do you approach the challenges of promoting inclusivity, social integration, and social desegregation in the city? I've already indicated earlier that in particular the city of Johannesburg has got what is called inclusionary policy, and this policy is intended to really bring in different strata of financial sort of communities together and to live side by side. But this policy also, it's only enforced because the city gives some incentives for those developers that want to have the inclusionary policy in their development schemes. The approach that we are doing as planners these days is to create what we call integrated human settlements. And the intention here is that where we develop new human settlements, especially those that are funded by public purse, we have deliberate sort of development focus, which says you have to have a different, what is it? Your different income groups living side by side, and even we no longer have what we call just your ordinary RDP developments these days. We always want to ensure that where we have these developments, we also, intentionally include other, typologies that would be affordable to mainly to medium income households, so that you have a level of integration into this. But you also need integration insofar as public amenities are concerned. So we have got a problem where most of these traditional RDP developments would hardly have any social facilities built into them. So now what the provincial government of Gauteng in particular is doing is they want to make sure that when we have these developments, we also include your social facilities, your schools, or at least we made provision for those sites for future development. But it is a very difficult sort of a process, because the housing in developments are mainly what you call demand driven, and too often they are developed ahead of the budget of the responsible government departments to provide for supportive land uses like schools, social halls, clinics, and so on. So you would develop this housing units, and they would take for many years before any of the social facilities could be brought into these new communities. So that is still a serious challenge, because there is no coordinated budgeting approach, if you like, where the actual residential units are brought in almost at the same time with the other supporting facilities to support such a residential development as a livable environment, if you like. Your other question is, could you share any specific experiences or projects where you have worked towards creating a more just and inclusive urban environment? Look, I have not really been involved mainly in the city of Johannesburg per se, but the few areas that one has got involved in would be more in the eastern side of the city. A few years ago, we developed an inclusionary housing scheme at a place called Galfontein, and this was really intended to accommodate some low-income communities in the areas of Rabi Ridge and Pumulong near Tembisa, although the area is still within the city of Joburg. So we have created. It was more a middle to a medium income development, which tried to put in an element of social housing therein. But it has yet not been developed. It is almost at the final stages of implementation, or of actually construction. So yes, that is the example that one can give in this kind of development patterns. Your other question is, what are some effective tools and practices you utilize to address energy efficiency, affordable housing, and infrastructure in Johannesburg? One of the most common tools used in this regard is to, especially on the new housing schemes, is to deliberately include in the initial planning or budgets of these communities or these housing schemes, is to include your energy services such as solar panels. Almost all developments now that are being developed in the city, especially in the affordable housing market, would be your solar geysers on each property, so that the cost of electricity to these areas or the consumption thereof becomes much less over time. But we will also use things like the road infrastructure, the street patterns, so that you have a lot more households likely to use one particular street than to have a plethora of streets that are only used by fewer families. So your kind of designs would go towards where one minimizes the streets and rather increases the livable spaces within those communities. And in that way, you would be obviously reducing the energy, the combustible energy insofar as vehicular movement is concerned. But you will also be increasing the public use of those common or public spaces by many more families than in your conventional designs. In some cases now we are more and more using panhandles to reduce the actual number of streets in a particular community. But then the challenge in some of these communities is many households or a couple of households do not actually like to live where you have so many panhandles. Everyone would rather want to have their own individual spaces that they will be responsible for than a shared space like a panhandle. But we cannot avoid it going into future. But also because you've got limited space and we want to maximize the space by reducing the number of streets and rather having a lot more of those spaces being occupied by actual households. That is my questions in regard